took up whole rooms. They were in research departments of colleges, whatever a research department was, but you'd never see it. Well, in this journal, it had demonstrations like a big round TV display that saved the dots on the screen were actually memory, that it could read and write. Wow, what an interesting thing to read about. You never would have known such a thing existed in the world. I also read about ones and zeros, and then how you can combine ones and zeros and add them. A 1 and a 0 is a 1. A 0 and a 1 is a 1. And it's basically as simple as normal arithmetic. And I sat there dumbfounded. I said, whoa, all this computer stuff, even logic, ands and OR gates and complements that change zeros into ones, this is all easy for a 5th grader in school. You don't need higher level mathematics. You don't need algebra, trigonometry, geometry. You don't need calculus to do this computer stuff. Any kid could understand it. Why don't they teach us in school? Now I had another area of specialness. I fell in love with this whole technology of computers because I was the one that had discovered it, but it wasn't very hard. It was easy for a young person to do, so I fell in love with it, and it was going to be my special thing my whole life. That simple a start. We had science fairs to show off science projects back then, and I got involved with building electronics projects, huge ones. One year I built a machine to show my father started teaching me whenever I had a question, he would instruct me. And although he was an engineer, and I was going to be an engineer, my siblings weren't engineers, my parents didn't force us along those lines. They were good teachers who taught us, to look at ourselves, to find our own experiences in life and decide who we want to be and what we want to be. And I wanted to be an engineer. So my father would instruct me, starting with how an atom was constructed. And I had an element collection in the science fair. I remember having mayonnaise jars full of mercury that would roll around, liquid mercury. And everybody kind of laughs because they think, oh, mercury's poisonous. But it's actually compounds of mercury that are poisonous. And we would play with this thing with our hands. Well, anyway, I built a big model with 92 lights for the electron orbit positions in an atom, and 92 switches for the natural elements, and tons of relays and wires, and I learned about diodes. A diode was a strange device that nobody young would hear about in those days. The electrons could go through a diode in one direction, but they couldn't go back the other way. And how great, and how that allowed me to make such a complicated project. Took weeks to build, it was huge, won all sorts of awards, and the big thing that I got out of that, I didn't do something small and trivial. I did a very long, complicated project, knowing exactly that I would finish and that it would work. Another year I built a tic-tac-toe computer. Tic-tac-toe is a game that you can never lose. There is a logic that allows you to never lose tic-tac-toe. You can play every game on a piece of paper, very diligently, take a lot of time, little tiny, I like to go down to the tiniest elements of something, and you can make a set of rules where to move in tic-tac-toe. Every one of those rules about a decision to make becomes a logic gate in electronics. And a logic gate involved 1 transistors, some diodes for inputs, and some resistors, and a little bit of power control. And, so I pounded nails into a big, huge piece of plywood, and I built hundreds of these little rule-making logic gates, hundreds of them, to play the game tic-tac-toe. The scale of the project being so huge is really the biggest value to me. A couple of years later, went to another science fair, and I built a device. I was very shy by this point in time. I was too shy to ask somebody, what is a computer? I was on a search to discover, what is a computer? I know that computers do calculations, and I know how to add ones and zeros. I learned that a long time ago. So why don't I build a device that you can flip a bunch of switches to ones and zeros, and it will add them. And then I decided to add the feature, or you can make it subtract them, one or the other. They're pretty similar. And I built this device with hundreds of transistors and hundreds of diodes all soldered together and put together in this deal, and I won a lot of great awards with that project. So I was well on my way to being a computer designer, but this was such an early year, nobody designed computers. I was going to be an engineer like my father. In 6th grade, I told my dad, I'm going to be an engineer like you, and secondly, I'm going to be a teacher because you've inspired me with your teaching. You've spoken about how important our teachers are in life. So I'm going to be a teacher second for 5th grade. Well, and I was determined to be an engineer, but we never designed computers. Engineers designed satellite guidance systems. Engineers designed radios. Engineers designed TVs. Engineers didn't design computers. Who knew? I didn't think I'd ever do that in life as a job. I just thought I'd do it for fun, just because I want to do it. You know, no other reason. The rewards were in my own head. Well, in high school, my electronics teacher realized that I knew all of the electronics that the school had. And he did something that was very, very good for a teacher. Most schools are closed systems, and they say your education is within our system, within the presentation, the words of the teacher, within the books that we prescribe. That is your education. Some teachers go beyond the school, and Mr. McCollum had friends in industry and arranged for some of his students every year to go out and work in industry, even though we were in high school. And I got chosen to go down and program a computer that I never thought I'd see in my life. What is programming? I got to learn about programming. My gosh, this is easy stuff. It doesn't require high-level mathematics that I've never had. So I went down, I programmed a computer once a week. This computer could do 1 million things a second. 1 million arithmetic operations a second. How many can a human being do? You know, 1 a second, and this computer can do 1 million. It's at least 1 million times as powerful as the fastest human being. How fast can you add 89 and 136? It's more than a second. So this computer was maybe a Superman, and I wrote a program that would play a game called the Knight's Tour. It's a puzzle problem. The Knight's Tour in chess is to get a knight on a chessboard to bounce around, hitting every square exactly once, not twice, not zero. And I wrote this program, and the lights just flickered, and the program had a mistake. Well, the next week I came back and ran it again with some printouts, and I finally discovered the program had no mistakes at all. It bounced the knight around the chessboard until it got stuck. And then it backed up and tried a different move. And then it backed up and tried a different move. 1 million moves a second. And still, it couldn't come up with an answer for 10 to the 25th years. So that was longer than the universe has been in existence. So what that taught me was a fast computer doesn't solve the complicated problems of the world. It still takes a mind, an approach, an algorithm, a method, some kind of intellect to really attack the right problems and the complicated problems and get solutions. And that would apply to all the problems of today's world, even all the energy problems and all the people problems. Well, innovation is also driven by goals. If you want something, you are so motivated your whole life, and you're young, and you come up with a goal. Someday I'd like to have a certain thing. You are going to do everything in your life and pay attention to courses in school, pay attention to things you can learn reading books that are going to get you to that goal. One of my first goals was when I had a transistor radio. The most wonderful piece of technology I could ever imagine. Little transistor radio that I could hold in my hand and listen to stations and put on my bed and listen all night long. And I listened every night for the first year that I had it. And I went to my dad and he said, they're going to make these chips with 6 transistors on a chip. And I said, hooray, so they can make better transistor radios, right? And he said, no, it's for the military. What, kind of after the military gets them, then what's left over eventually comes into the people's things. And I always felt disappointed. I wanted consumer products, the sort of appliances. Electronics is supposed to make us a better life. It's supposed to make things we didn't have in the world. We have washing machines. Our great-grandparents didn't have washing machines. How did they ever manage to get by? And all this technology is going to give us a better life because a better life is a happier life. And my dad explained, well, we really aren't happier than the caveman that we can prove, but we keep thinking. We have this drive that's built into humans to keep trying to create ways to do more things, thinking that will make us happier. Well, I wanted the average Joe in the average home to have these neat appliances, like vacuum machines and transistor radios. And I was always hoping that the consumer electronics would be the force on the state-of-the-art of microelectronics and not the military uses. I told my dad in 6th grade I was going to be an engineer like him and a teacher second because my teacher had been so important in my life and she recognized me as a genius because I was good at math and science. So she would give me straight A's, figuring I must be the brightest student at everything else. And then another goal that I came up with was to own my own computer. In high school, when I was programming computers down at Sylvania and Sunnyvale, I discovered a manual, and the manual described the architecture of a computer. The manual was called the Small Computer Handbook, and it described the architecture like a building has so many walls and so many windows and doorways, and somebody who knows lumber pieces that are available can pick the right pieces and build